Karen from Celtic Healing Corner. Welcome to the final video, number 10, in our Crystals for Beginners series. And today we're going to talk about crystal grids and how to set up a crystal grid. Now, although it's a beginner course, in order to be able to set up a grid, you need more than one crystal. So if you've reached a point where you've started to collect some crystals, maybe now's the time to think about setting up a crystal grid in your home. It can go anywhere, basically. You may have a sort of sacred place or a special place in your home where you have those sorts of things. You might just want to have it in your bedside table. You may want to have it in your office. You may want to have it in the lounge room as a centerpiece. It's entirely up to you, depending on the purpose of your grid, as to where you might want to place it. So you do need more than one crystal, but you don't necessarily need more than one type of crystal. So a grid can be very small, or it can be absolutely massive. In fact, there are some grids where you are the anchor of the grid itself, and I'll talk more about anchors in a minute. This one here is a very, very simple clear quartz grid with just 4 crystals feeding into the center one, which is the anchor. So the one that's in the middle is called the anchor, and it's the one that brings all of the energies together and kind of marries them all up and joins them all up. Often that is a point, and we've talked about this in previous DVDs, because you want to be able to transmit energy out as well as draw energy in, depending on the purpose of your grid. So points are very useful for that. Obviously, although these are points, they don't have a nice flat base. So if I wanted to try and use that, it's going to fall over. It doesn't mean you can't use it as an anchor. As you can see in this grid here, I've got a raw piece of aquamarine, and it's not standing up. It's just there as the anchor in the middle. So it doesn't have to stand up. But if you want a point, if you're going to the trouble of getting a point, you usually do want it to stand up. If this is the type of point that you've got with a rough base, you can use a piece of putty or blue tack or something like that and place it in to help it stand up if that's what you want to do. But most people seem to go for a point that already has a flat base that's been carved to have a flat base, because it just makes it easier to stand. Some of the anchors you may want to use as you progress in your crystal collection might be master crystals, and master crystals are very, very specific crystals in terms of the way that they are configured in their faces and the purpose that they have. They're not the subject of this beginner course, so I won't labour them, but it's important for you to know that such things exist, because you'll hear that term, and so it's good if you know what it means. This particular one is a master crystal. This is a transmitter crystal. It has 7 sides on this face, 7 sides on this face, and it has the transmitter triangle in the middle. These crystals here that are in this grid are also specialised. They're double terminated, in other words, they have a point on both ends. And these are also master crystals because these are window crystals. They have a diamond shape. And so I've set this grid up with a very specific purpose. I want these windows to be opening to windows for higher realms and also windows for my future manifestation in terms of things that are happening in my own life. So I've set this grid up specifically for that purpose. You might have a totally different purpose, and that's fine, but I'm just giving you by way of example how you might just have one kind of crystal. You don't need to have lots of different crystals. This one here, this grid here, again only has one kind of crystal in the actual grid itself, but it's surrounded by citrine chips. So this one is a manifesting grid. The clear quartz amplifies, and it's just got 3 crystals pointing in. You might have noticed that I've also got a different crystal that goes with each of these grids, and I'll explain more about these in a moment. These are called wands, and these actually activate the grid once they're active, and you'll get to see that in a few moments. But they're not actually part of the grid, they just activate it. So these are very similar to this. You can see this is a cross. If I wanted to, I could add more crystals in, and they don't necessarily have to be exactly the same. For instance, these aren't double terminated, and they're not even exactly the same size. But I could still include these and even these into my grid and make a star shape if I wanted. Sometimes it might just be a circle that you've made with the anchor in the middle. Or you might make a circle around your star shape or your cross. So there's lots of different configurations that you can do. The purpose of the grid is to link the energies of the crystals that you choose together so that they work together. So they become like a network, I guess, and they become amplified in their energies. Most grids, therefore, tend to be symmetrical. They tend to follow a geometric pattern in some way, even if it's just a simple cross, or in this case, a simple triangle. You can also decide to be very symmetrical about it. This particular grid here is the Flower of Life pattern, and I've chosen a grid board. You can get this printed off on paper, you can get it printed on cloth. I've chosen a hard board to support my crystals, and I've put it within a glass bowl just to keep it all together. But you can choose, to set it up however you want. And you don't even need a grid board or a cloth. You can actually just set it straight up on the table, just like I have with this one. I'm going to move this one for a moment, just so I've got some room to show you that it doesn't have to be complicated. In this case, I've just got some lapis. You could have any kind of stone that you wanted, and I've just got 4 of them. So I'm just going to make a little cross shape. And the anchor doesn't even have to be very big. These are very small anchors, but I could just have a little anchor like that. And that's still perfectly fine. That's still a grid. It's got no board, it's got no geometric pattern that's complicated. It's just got some simple tumble stones and a little anchor in the middle. If you really wanted to, if you didn't even have a point, you could just have 5 of them like that. As long as you've got one in the middle, I'd probably choose the bigger one because I want that to be able to amplify and connect all the energies. So they could be as simple as that. Or you could start to branch out a little bit and get a little bit more complicated with how you're magnifying the energies and amplifying them and where you're sending it. So with this one here, you can see I've got different kinds of crystals in here. I've mostly got tumble stones with a few points. I've got some citrine points and I've got some quartz points. And whether you point the crystal in or out is entirely up to you and what you're guided to do. But it means, for instance, that all of this energy is being put into there and sent out into the universe. If I had the crystal points going the other way, I'd be drawing in the energy and sending it out into the room. So depending on the purpose that you want to set your grid up for, might determine how you do the points. You might just be guided intuitively about how you think the points should go and what feels right for you. That's perfectly okay as well. So in this grid, I've chosen the symmetry of 6. So I have 6 of each of the stones with the exception of the anchor in the middle, which is generating all the energy and marrying it up. This is a manifestation grid. This is wanting to bring wealth and abundance into my life. So I've chosen stones that I know will help me with that. So I've got some lapis lazuli, I've got some carnelian, I've got some pyrite, I've got some citrine, and I've got some clear quartz. And of course I've got my anchor in the middle. I've got a citrine wand for this one. You can see my other wands that I showed you before are clear quartz, because clear quartz is the master healer and the master amplifier, so it's the simplest one and the most readily available. Often a wand won't have two separate points. It will have a rounded kind of bottom, but there's no reason you can't use a double terminator as a wand if you wish. This one I've chosen citrine, and I've specifically chosen citrine because I want it to be a manifesting grid, and so I wanted to amplify that energy, the energy of bringing more money, more abundance, more wealth, more health into my life. This grid here, you can see, this is a healing grid. So this is the one that I have on my bedside table, and it's for a number of different things that I'm working on in my own health, and so therefore I've got them set out in what we call Metatron's cube. We talked very early on in the videos about the sacred geometry. These are just two, the flower of life and the Metatron's cube. There are lots of other patterns and boards that you can get. I have one which you'll see in one of the slides of my wolf, who is my shamanic guide, and that's also in a grid pattern. So it doesn't have to be a sacred geometry pattern, but generally there is some kind of symmetry or some kind of pattern to it. Now with this one, you'll see that I haven't got equal numbers of every particular crystal. I've got different numbers, but you can see that they're balanced on each side. So for instance, I've got 6 clear quartz around the outside, but next to it I've got some tourmaline, some black tourmaline, 3 of those, and then I have 3 smoky quartz. So although I don't have 6 of them, I've balanced the tourmaline and the smoky quartz. And if you keep looking around, you'll see similar sorts of patterns happening. So sometimes there's 6, sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 2 and 2 and 2. But they are always in balance. They are always in some kind of symmetry or balance with each other. And that's generally sort of, I guess, the only rule of a grid, that it has to be in some kind of balance, because you're trying to bring those energies together, and if it's just a hodgepodge mess, it doesn't kind of gel together that well. So once you've decided what kind of symmetry you want to use, as I said, you may decide that you want a cloth, a board, you may just want to go with something simple like a cross shape. But deciding on that symmetry will then help you to work out how they're going to work together, how the crystals that you've chosen are going to marry together into kind of like an orchestra, into a harmony of energies together. If you decide that you want to create a grid for a certain purpose, you may very well choose certain crystals. So for instance, if you wanted to create a grid for wealth, you would choose crystals like jade, pyrite, adventurine, goldstone, citrine, or tiger's eye. You might decide that you want to have more love in your life or bring that special person into your life. And so you might set up a grid that's going to manifest love. So you might choose things like rose quartz, rhodochrosite, malachite, carnelian, rhodonite, amazonite, and aragonite jasper. However you decide to do it, of course, is entirely up to you. And as we've already said, you don't have to have a lot of stones. You might just have one kind of stone, or in the case of this little grid with the lapis, just 2 kinds of stones. Entirely up to you. But no matter how you decide to set this up, you do need to make sure that the grid has some kind of balance in some way, and you need to, of course, have done those preliminary steps that we talked about in our earlier DVDs. The cleansing, the charging, and the programming. But in this case, not only will you program the crystals to work for the purpose that you've intended, but you'll also program them to work together, to balance those harmonies of energies and work together in the grid that you're creating. Once you've done that and you've set up your grid, the next part is to actually charge it and to activate your grid. And as we said earlier, usually a wand is what you would use. If you don't have a wand, you can simply use a crystal point. And quartz is very good for that because, as we said, it's the magnifier, it's the amplifier, it's the master crystal. So you don't necessarily need to have, in this case, a double terminated wand. In this case, a 1-point wand with a butted end. It's entirely up to you what kind of wand you want to use, or whether you're just going to use another crystal itself to do the activating. But generally a point is needed in some way. And the first thing that you would do is place your intent into this wand that you want to activate this grid. Of course, as we said earlier, if you've got Reiki, you would put your Reiki in either directly through your hands if you're Reiki 1, or if you're Reiki 2 or a master, you'd put your symbols in. And you'd use the wand then to charge. Otherwise, if you don't have Reiki, you're simply putting your energy and intent into the wand that you want to activate this grid for the purpose that you've intended. And then what you need to do is you need to start, and I've got a diagram that I'll put up a little later in a slide to show you, but you need to start in the center of the grid, next to the anchor. And then you would come out and down. And you would go around each of those particular areas that you want to activate. Obviously, a bigger grid is going to require more activation. And you would say your intent as you were activating the grid. So, for instance, this grid is a manifestation grid for wealth and abundance. So if I was activating it right now, I would put my Reiki symbols, in my case I use Reiki, so I'd put my Reiki symbols in and then I would start to activate. So I would say whatever intent I wanted for the grid. In this case, it's going to be for manifesting abundance and wealth. And I usually do it so that I say my intent 3 times. Again, being Celtic, the number 3 is important to me. You can choose however many times that feels suitable for you. You might just say it once. So I'll give you a demonstration. I would say, I activate this grid for wealth and abundance. I activate this grid for wealth and abundance. I activate this grid for wealth and abundance. And then, once I've activated each arm, I guess, of the grid, I then want to activate around it to seal the grid. And that's pretty much it. If you've got a simple grid, of course, it's a lot simpler. And you might just use, in this case, a clear quartz wand or a clear quartz point. Again, starting at my anchor. Of course, I would have put in my intent and my energy into the grid, and then I would just activate again around each of the arms and then around the grid. And that's pretty much how you would activate it. So I hope you found that informative, and I hope you have a lot of fun going off and playing with your grids and experimenting a little bit. Now, I did promise you there's going to be a very special offer at the end of this series, and we've actually reached the end of this series. So what you've seen in this 10-part series is an introduction for beginners to crystals. I do run a beginners crystals course in person. It's a 1-day course, and you can check it out at my website, www.celtichealing.com.au. If you want to register for the next Crystals for Beginners, then I suggest that you use the code Crystal Divas, and that will give you 10% off. So when you want to book, if you give me a call or send me an email, quote that code Crystal Divas, and you'll automatically get 10% off the cost of the course. Thank you very much for joining me. If you've enjoyed the series, please subscribe to this wellness channel, because we will be putting up other DVDs with other topics. If you've got any particular topics you'd like me to cover, please put them in the comments below and I'll try and make sure that I meet your needs. Thanks a lot for joining me, and I'll see you next time.